What's good, y'all? Solomon here. I hope you guys are having a great day. I thought I'd announce in today's video that I just released my third online course on the Czech Pirc Defense, over 6 hours in content. I put a lot of work into it, 20 PGNs, 7 chapters with an intro and a conclusion as well. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it, those of you that get it. If you're interested in getting the Czech Pirc course, since we just launched it, we're doing a 1-month discount of 30% off. So all you got to do, go down to the link below. And there, you can click on that link and plug in the discount code Czech Pirc 2024, and you will receive 30% off of the course. Only good for September. If you get it, I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I think the Czech Pirc is a very underrated option. And just to give you a little bit of a sneak peek into the course, I'm going to be showing chapter 1 in this video. So we're about to zoom over to chapter 1 of the course. I think it's about 15 minutes or so. Again, the whole course is over 6 hours in length, but I thought I'd just share chapter 1 as kind of a sneak peek, of the kind of things that we're going to be looking at. And for those of you that don't know what the heck the Czech Pirc is, that's okay, right? The Czech Pirc, we'll go over it right now. We'll do a quick intro, right? So the Czech Pirc, we see the move E4, right? We're playing D6, knight F6, knight C3. Now, in this video, when you watch chapter 1, you're going to be seeing different moves from white, like E5 and other things that white can try there. But overall, right, chapter 1 covers bad moves. So we're going to be looking at moves like E5, D5, and bishop C4 here, right? The rest of the chapters, we're looking at better options from white. So we're looking at moves like knight F3, F4. Again, we are looking at these moves in that chapter 1. In the course, we also look at bishop D3, we look at bishop G5, we look at bishop E2, we look at A4, G3. There's a bunch of different things that we look at here, and we look at how, okay, as the Czech Pirc Defense player, how do we respond to each of these moves? I want you guys to be prepared for whatever comes your way, right? And these are really the top options that you see and that you need to be ready for, okay? And even if you do see something weird like H3 or something, as you're going to see in chapter 7, our approach to those types of moves are very similar to another type of quiet move like A4 or G3 or bishop E2, right? Any of those kind of quiet options. The Czech Pirc Defense player does have a plan in place, a system that they can count on. Time in, time out, right? And yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. Again, I will leave a link down below. If you're interested in that 30% sale, just go down, click on that link, plug in the discount code Czech Pirc 2024, and you'll get that 30% off. Only good until the end of the month. And yeah, hope you enjoy chapter 1. Here we go, y'all. Chapter 1 of our Czech Pirc Defense course. And as mentioned in the intro, I thought it'd be good to start out with some bad moves that your opponent might play. Now, it's worth mentioning, if you're at a high elo, you're probably never, maybe a couple times, but hardly at all. You're hardly at all going to see these moves if you're playing against, top level competition. But if you're a beginner, you might see these kind of moves more than you expect, right? And I think oftentimes as players, we jump to, if we're playing something like the Czech Pirc, if we're playing some kind of setup where we're not trying to checkmate the king right away, we're just, playing solid chess, playing D6, knight F6, C6 against white's centralized 2 pawns and that knight on C3, we often jump to, okay, wait, what if our opponent doesn't want us to do that? Our opponent goes, you know what, I don't want them to set up into their setup. I'm just going to go crazy, right? What do we do about that? Well, that's what this chapter is all about. Okay, it's very easy for the opponent to think they have space, which technically they do, but that doesn't mean that they have a winning attack. In fact, oftentimes, if you push too hard, you're the one that ends up in trouble. As we know, we're playing the Czech Pirc, but if you want to play the Czech Pirc, you got to play the Pirc, right? We play this move of D6. Now, sure, you could argue that, black here could play C6, D6, and knight F6, but honestly, I think D6 is just a better move order. We can play knight F6 here, but we're not worried about E5, right? A lot of players here, probably more often at lower elo range are going to play something like E5 here, going, I'm going to take space, I'm going to attack, all that kind of stuff. Guys, this is just a bad idea. This is not a good move for white. The moment they do this, we're winning. We're winning this position, right? We can take that pawn. Now, if you don't want to take back and you move the knight somewhere, let's capture off a second pawn. It's not like we're down in development. We have one piece developed as black. White has been so busy pushing their pawns, and none of their back rank pieces have even moved yet. And if you capture back, we're now able to take the queen on D1, right? Now, I get it. A lot of players might not feel comfortable in the end game, but I really encourage you guys to study the end game, focus on it, work on it. We might be, in a position where it's move 5 and queens are off the board, but black is better here because we're about to go up a pawn. And most of the time in chess, if you're up a pawn, especially if your opponent has nothing to show for it, I mean, you're winning. This position, we're winning here. Okay, these 2 pawns are hanging, right? If you play a move like king e1 or something, we can snatch off this pawn. We're up a pawn, up development, nothing to complain about, and we can castle, and our opponent cannot, right? Oftentimes we're going to be looking to castle queenside in a position like this, sometimes with check against the king, right? But again, you can't save both of these unless you play the move f4, and if you do that, you did save your pawns, but now we just play knight f2 a check, take the rook off. We're winning this position, right? We're up a rook right now. And sure, white can, really look to trap that knight. But even if they do, we're still up the exchange. We're still up the exchange there. Okay, so remember that. When you see these, 2 pawns here, if white continues pushing with e5, they're losing that position. You are winning there. Take the pawn, right? Don't play knight g4 right away. Take the queen first, then play knight g4. You have yourself a great game with 2 hanging pawns that the knight attacks. If they save their pawns, they lost their rook. Now let's look at this move, knight c3. We know c6, right? We're now in the Czech Pirc. So many things can happen here. We're going to be looking at a lot of great moves that white has in this course and really how we need to approach them. e5 is just not one of them. Now, I will say this is not as bad as earlier, right? The whole point being that when we do take, which is the best move, and we capture on d1, right, which is really what we need to do there, right? You could argue that you can play something like knight c5, but I would recommend taking that queen off the board. The big difference here is that the knight can take. And now, knight g4 just doesn't do what it did, right? It doesn't get the job done like it did previously, because in this case, only 1 pawn is hanging. White can play a move like f4, they're fine. White can play a move like knight f3 or bishop f4, they're good, right? Because this is not a threat. Okay, so yeah, I mean, in that kind of instance, we don't want to play knight g4, right? Because we're not double attacking anything. We're attacking a single pawn, and white can very easily defend it. So in this case, I recommend centralizing our knight. Now, it is worth mentioning, right? I want to mention this. Again, if king takes d1, knight g4, same idea. That's a position where, okay, you got 2 hanging pawns. Let's go after one of them. But when you're looking at this position and white captures back with the knight, again, right, we're only attacking 1 pawn. Let's not do that. Let's play this move of knight d5. And, there's a lot of different things that white could go with here. I mean, first off, let's say white just, tries to kick our knight around. Okay, we'll jump around. That's fine. They are getting a lot of pawn moves in, but they're not developing their pieces at the moment. And in fact, we're currently threatening to fork the king and the rook if white stops this with knight e3, which, by the way, is the only move here that gives them a positive evaluation, which is not much of an evaluation in the positive direction for them, according to Stockfish. Let's now play a move like knight c7, right? We can go after that pawn. If you play a3, okay, we'll go back. That's fine, right? Something like f4 here, just forging ahead, defending that pawn. Let's activate this guy. Bring this knight, towards the center. We're looking at b3, right? These 3 pawns for the rest of this game are unable to defend b3. So let's look to get our knight in there. Something like knight f3, let's jump in. Let's support the knight, right? I mean, these knights are just, hand in hand, very strong, covering a ton of squares here. This rook cannot even move. And all right, I mean, we could see something like bishop e2. There's a lot of different moves that you can go with here, but whether you go for something like g6, looking, to eventually fianchetto your bishop, whether you're looking at something like a5, something, along the lines of just continuing from that point with strong development. Black has a solid game here. We're not winning by any means, but I will say just develop your pieces, right? Develop your pieces, make space. When you play the move of g6, you could end up fianchettoing that bishop, but this idea of bishop h6 can actually be pretty strong, going after that f4 pawn as well. We want to be careful, right, when we're thinking about fianchettoing our bishops, because we want to go on a diagonal that is active. Now, sure, again, one pro of g6 is that at some point you can fianchetto on g7. That's great, especially if this pawn moves or if we win it, or if this pawn becomes weak. But at the current moment, I would probably side more with bishop h6 going after that pawn. Okay, so, but that's something that you can read out as the game goes forward. Now, let's say here white goes with e6. This is actually a really good move. Don't take this. Don't take it. Now, technically it's okay, but those pawns are a headache, right? They just are. So what I recommend here is just moving your knight. Now you got two pieces attacking it, so it's really in white's best interest to not let us take it with a piece, but instead capture on f7. We take back with the king. Our king is more out in the open now, but that's okay, right? The queens are off the board, and I'm not seeing any direct way for white to really attack this king like crazy. I mean, even c4, it's taken up, so the bishop can't throw in a check there. If b4, let's throw a knight in. Okay, now sure, this b3 square is no longer a hole because a bunch of pawns have passed it, but we are forking the bishop and the rook. The next move, we can snatch that bishop off. We have the bishop here. Let's play g6. This is a prime example, right? We get kicked. We don't want to take here and give white more activity. Let's play knight c5. And this is a prime example of getting a move like bishop g7 and really fighting for an amazing diagonal there. Black here is simply better. Now, going back to knight d5, let's say we see something like knight f3. Okay, let's play g6. Now, oftentimes in the Czech Pirc, we're actually not going to fianchetto our bishop in a lot of those main kind of lines, right? Like especially going up against something like the Austrian attack, as an example, right? And a lot of lines and a lot of moves we're not going to look to fianchetto. But in this case, I mean, we're out of a normal Czech Pirc, right? The moment white plays e5 very quickly like that, with not much backing, we're out of a regular Czech Pirc. Okay, so in this case, you know, g6 is a good move. I would stay away from e6 personally here because that really locks in this bishop. Okay, so g6, playing bishop g7. Now, this bishop doesn't see very far, but no pawns are defending this guy. So this is a very weak pawn, and there's only one defender. Let's go after it. If you want to play something like castle kingside, boom, we're attacking the knight. And yeah, I mean, we're threatening to capture off that knight, win this pawn. Let's say white goes, you know what, I'm going to take your knight off the board and then play something like bishop f4, really, you know, hanging on to that guy as much as possible. Okay, let's take anyways. We're damaging your pawn structure, right? We could play a move like knight c6. And yeah, I mean, we're putting a ton of pressure on that guy. You know, there's different things that you could see here. I mean, for example, rook e1. That does save the pawn, but then we have knight d4. We're threatening a fork here. We're threatening a fork here, right? If you move the rook back so that there's no rook fork, we have another fork. Okay, so yeah, I mean, you know, black can get a extremely great position there very quickly if white's not careful. Let's say we see something like knight c3. All right, let's kick that knight around, right? We don't want to lose our pawn. Let's kick the knight around. If the knight goes back, we got to be careful here. If we take on e5 right now, knight takes d4, we're sitting at even material. We're still better, especially because white's pawn structure is so bad. But that's not the best that we can do, right? In the same kind of way, bishop takes e5, white can take, distracting our knight from the defense of that pawn, and then take. We're sitting at even material. So what should we do here? We should castle queenside, right? Put more defense on that pawn. We're still attacking this pawn twice, and white really can't get more defense to support it. If rook a d1, now that there's more tension here, there's some more tactical opportunities that we have. In this case, we can capture on e5 with the knight. Look, if you take with the bishop, we take back. We're just up a pawn here. We have two defenders. You have two attackers. You're not going to win that if you're white. Going back, if rook takes d4, let's get a fork. We're just going to take that guy right off. We're completely winning this position. And if knight takes d4, we have a rook takes d4 sacrifice. Great move, right? It's a sacrifice, but only for a moment, right? Because, I mean, again, if something like bishop takes e5, we capture back. We're supporting our rook. That's great. And if the rook captures back, we get our material. We take a pawn, snatch off that rook. We're +4 here, okay? Up 4 points in material, right? White here has 5 pawns, we have 6, and we have a piece. So, you know, just keep that in mind, right? If your opponent just goes crazy against you in the opening and they just start pushing like there's no tomorrow very quickly, it's just not going to work. Now, going back to this move of c6, I also just want to mention this move of d5, right? Does this do anything? It's not terrible. I would say that we have a, you know, pretty much an even game here. I would prefer black, though. You know, the engine, you know, if the engine's telling you up 0.1, down 0. It doesn't matter, right? It's even, practically, okay? But In this kind of case, I would play g6. Now, again, usually in the Czech Pirc, we're not playing this, but if white is going to play d5 so quickly and just give us this amazing diagonal for our bishop, we're playing a version of the Pirc, in which case we just have a great diagonal, right? I mean, just wide open there. So, yeah, I mean, that's just not the best option from white. Bishop c4, another bad move. I'm just including this because, you know, some might get worried about some kind of attacking stuff here. If you see bishop c4, this is bad for a number of reasons. We get tempo with b5. We also get tempo with d5, which is what the engine particularly likes. I mean, if the bishop drops back, we can take on e4, capture back, capture back. You know, black here with a solid game. We're just playing chess from here. None of that really, you know, posed any threat to us. And okay, if white decides to capture, we take back. Okay, this kind of reminds me of a Caro-Kann type position now, but we're getting tempo on this bishop. If white takes, right, that doesn't work. White has 2 attackers, we have 2 defenders. You need one more attacker than you have a defender in order to survive, so or really win that trade. So in this case, okay, bishop takes d5, we take, they take, we take. The defenders won because it was 2-2. There weren't more attackers than the defenders, so we finished that out on top as black. If white here goes, you know what, I'm going to check. All right, let's block. If you take back, I mean, we get more development. Let's bring our knight that's not into the game into the game. End of knight f3, we play e6. Very solid pawn structure here. No weaknesses to speak of. And a simple game plan. I mean, we got moves like bishop d6, castling kingside, a6, rook c8. Great spot. Queen b6 could also be a really good square to go to. You know, just great overall play here for black. We've managed to reach equality and then some. And if the bishop goes back to b3 here, I mean, that's just a bad bishop in my opinion, right? We don't want to play e6 right now because then our bishop is not active. Let's get that bishop out first and then play the move of e6. If castling kingside, we have knight c6 here. Okay, I would say our light squared bishop is better than theirs. I would say our dark squared bishop is better than theirs because this dark squared bishop it has a dark squared pawn. Our dark squared bishop, on the other hand, a bunch of light squared pawns that can get really active in a position like this. And, you know, let's just say we see something like bishop f4. There's a lot of ways that you can play this. You could just play bishop d6, right? And, you know I just said that this bishop is better. But in this case, you know, the bishop on c1 did improve. And if white does decide to capture our piece, we're going to capture back with development, right? I mean, if you're going to take our piece and we take back and we just got a piece that wasn't active into the game, that's a great step. So yeah, I mean, that really concludes chapter 1. I mean, this is a short chapter, but it's worth covering, right? If your opponent plays e4 and d4 and they play e5 right away, they're losing. They're losing. When you capture back, they're only going to have a king defending their queen. Now, if they play knight c3 first, the knight can capture back, but I mean, that's just a solid position for black. I don't know why white would want that personally. And, you know, something like bishop c4 going after the weak f7 pawn, which is kind of the focus of so many chess opening traps, it just doesn't work in the Czech Pirc because we've already played c6, which helps support the move of either b5 or d5, which is what the engine recommends there. Let's head over to chapter 2, in which case we cover a good option from the white side with the move of f4. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of September in 2024. I appreciate y'all a ton. It's been great getting to know you guys. And for those of you that haven't thought about joining the Patreon, there's some exclusive benefits that you gain by becoming a member. And yeah, I mean, if you guys do join, I'm excited to start talking to you guys over on the platform. On top of that, guys, here's the thing. Look, it's September. Okay, it's September. There's only so much time left to get that Czech Pirc Defense course. Click the link. Click the freaking link, plug in the discount code, get your 30% off, only good until the end of the month, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Let's get it.